And a good day to you, Explorer Nation. John Lynskey here with episode 15, season 3 of Looking Back with Lynskey. We are getting up there. Our guest today wears multiple hats in a very distinguished professional career. He's a corporate attorney, a third generation funeral home owner, long time Columbus School Board member, counsel to the president and the principal, a Hall of Famer, an alumni dad, and now a budding playwright. From the legendary class of 1981, it's a pleasure to introduce Mick Maspons, Esquire. Hey, Mick, welcome to the program, buddy.
Thanks, John. I appreciate the kind words.
Well, they're all true. In many cases, I have to stretch a little bit, but not in this one. Not in this one. All of it well deserved and true. So, Mick, let's go back to where it all began. Your classmate, my friend, our friend Sean DeKnight, has described the Columbus that you arrived at in 1977 as the tribe, a mixture of Irish, German, Italian, and Cuban kids. So let's go back to that special era at Columbus. How'd you get to Columbus, Mick?
Well, I grew up in Westchester.
Okay.
I went to St. Brennan's Elementary, and like my house was right across the street from what the time was the seminary, which is now St. Brennan's High. It's still the seminary, but
Yeah.
and we would my brother and I would walk to school every day. So I would always, when I was at St. Brennan's, I obviously would see Columbus just across the fence, and I was always very much into baseball. So I would go to the baseball games. Brett Bainham, Rob Murphy.
Wow. Yeah.
All those guys, and I remember that I would watch on the other side of the fence all the games, and I said, "I'm
Yeah.
going to Columbus. I'm going to Columbus." And then I think it must have been my 8th grade year, because I don't think in 7th grade they already started coming to see us. But Brother Kevin came to
Okay.
see it. And I was sitting in the class, and Brother Kevin came in to tell us about Columbus. And it was like a pep rally. And I said, "That's where I'm going." And so it was always predestined that I was going to be going to Columbus. So that's sort of how it started. And the geography didn't change much, but boy, oh boy, did the landscape inside change quite a bit.
There was a certain energy back then. I think we can describe it that way. And I think all of us instantly fell in love with it. And yeah, we came from different demographics and everything else, but within a year, everybody's an explorer. It's
Mhm.
a family, and everybody finds their way. You just mentioned it. You had a very successful baseball career at Columbus, and you were privileged to play for two extraordinary coaches in Jim Henry and Paul Maneri. Talk about your baseball experience and what those two men meant to you as a young man.
Well, Jim Henry was my JV baseball coach first, and the legendary Hank Clofcorn.
God bless. Mick, Hank was my big brother when I was a ninth grader. We had that
Mhm.
big brother program. What a great guy to guide
Yeah,
you through Columbus. Love that.
amazing. And he was a catcher, which I was
Yeah.
a catcher. So, and you look at Hank Clofcorn, and 2 seconds into the conversation, he starts spouting to you in Spanish, and I'm like, "Wait a second, Hank Clofcorn in Spanish?" But so Jim and Paul were our JV coaches. Jim was also assistant varsity coach my sophomore year, and then Bob Lewis, who was the head baseball coach,
Mhm.
became the head football coach. So then Jim became the varsity coach, and Paul became his assistant. And Jim was probably 23 years old, 24 years old at
He
the
was a
time.
young guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And what a passionate guy. I mean, he just loved being around the kids. He loved baseball. He was more like a big brother. And then Paul just, would not stop. Paul was like on Red Bull 24/7 before Red Bull existed. And it was really just a lot of fun to be around them. I mean, we worked very, very hard.
Yeah.
But they were just amazing baseball. Well, obviously, you could look at their careers. I mean, Jim going to Creighton, then the Cubs. Now I think he's with the Yankees. Paul, his career legendary. Those are
Legendary.
the guys who we were exposed to at the age of 16, 17, and 18.
You know, knowing both of them, you know, you just sense some guys are destined for greatness.
Hmm.
You could tell they were
Oh
going
yeah,
places, and yet they left quite a legacy at
absolutely,
Columbus. And,
absolutely.
you know, no, we didn't have a Moss program back then. And, you know, we're very grateful that we do today. Yet, you and all of us received great educations at Columbus, the full experience at Columbus, so much so that you were able to go on to Harvard. And, you know, we've had a number of guys go to Harvard from that era and play baseball in the Ivy League. So, you know, talk a little bit about that.
Well, for my class of '81, it was Gerald Pierre and myself went to Harvard,
Yeah.
which was, I think, the first time we'd had two guys going to Harvard the same year. Look, at the time, the great thing about Columbus is there was a place for you.
Yes.
You know, if you wanted to excel in science, but you may not have been so strong in English, there was a place for you. I liked, as weird as it sounds, I liked to study. I liked to learn. I had some amazing teachers. I mean, Pat Call, who's still around, was one of my
Yeah.
teachers. Brother Marcos, who's still around, was one of my teachers. John Roach, who's
Oh,
not teaching anymore, was one of my teachers. And you would basically, you could find the place where you fit. You know, uh, I did well enough to get into Harvard. I think baseball had a little bit to do with it.
and
To
that's
be,
fine. Yeah.
yeah, but you know, it wasn't. It was very interesting because it wasn't frowned upon to like to study or to be a good student. That's one of the funniest things that, like, my son, we'll talk about at some point in
Yeah.
time. He graduated in 17. My son said, "Dad, at Columbus, it was kind of cool to do well. It was kind of cool to study as compared to other places where people look at you and they say, you know, what are you doing? You know, it's like, don't shine, don't try to do well." You know, some of his friends, you know, Trajan Bandy, who I know you know very well, who's a very dear friend.
Great young
Tra-
man. Yes.
yeah, Trajan said to me, you know, Mr. Maspons, it was cool to do well, where in some of the other schools that he could have gone to, it wasn't expected, nor was it
Encouraged.
encouraged. Right.
Exactly.
So, and it was like that back then. I mean, it was always somebody pushing you. You always had a lot of really strong role models. You know, and I wanted to say male role models, but no, we had some amazing female role models. As I said, Pat Call, Irene Como, we had so many. Miss Foyle was not there yet, but you now know what she's done. We had some amazing role models at Columbus. Brother Sheehan was our principal.
Yes. What a great man.
No
Uh,
nonsense, no nonsense.
no, the fact that he hired Foyo O'Brien and myself and Stiano, I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know what he was thinking there, but I'm glad he did. We all are.
And then Lou Savino wandering the halls.
Oh,
Yep, yep,
Smiling Lou.
yep.
So it
That's
was it was quite a place to go to school, but it did get you into Harvard, that and hard work. And you know, to play in the Ivy Leagues, Brian Flynn was at UPenn,
yes, he
Eric
was.
Evans was at UPenn. I mean, we had some guys that went on to nice careers in the Ivy League.
Yep.
And so what was the Harvard experience like for you?
Well, at first it was a little intimidating. First of all, a Cuban kid from Miami going to Harvard. The hardest part, I think, was acclimating to a completely different environment.
Yeah,
It was, living away from home. At the time, not a lot of Cuban kids left home.
true.
And looking back on it now, being a parent, I realized how hard it was for my parents, for me to be away, because they'd experienced so much loss in losing their country and coming here, and now their kid was a few thousand miles away.
Good point.
And then, of course, now I'm in this world of, it wasn't the, and I don't mean to disparage Harvard because it was a great experience, but it's not the camaraderie that you had at Columbus. I mean, it was much more um, competitive, but in a different way. At the same time, I was trying to balance baseball. And baseball there is nothing like baseball at the University of Miami or LSU or something. I mean, our fall season was 12 practices and a couple of scrimmages,
Yeah.
but we still worked out all the time.
Yeah.
The problem was we worked out indoors.
Yeah.
Because of the weather.
Yeah, sure.
So, and when our practices started in the spring, in February, we had a 6 a.m. practice schedule because it's not a priority there.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's not like the University of Miami where you have a beautiful field or beautiful facility. And I'm talking about 1981.
Sure.
So, so it was a huge adjustment for me. Something that I think made me grow up in a hurry. And I mean, I wouldn't give back the struggle for anything in the world just because it was so formative. But it was interesting. It was interesting.
Enough so that you decided to stay in Boston after Harvard and go to Boston College Law School.
Right.
What attracted you to a career as an attorney, Mick? Where was there a moment, or how'd that come about?
Well, I mean, I always liked debate, not debate in the sense of forensics or debate like we have. I always liked to talk. I liked to discuss issues. I always just like to have the banter back and forth. I always liked that. And since I was always playing sports, the competitive nature of it was something I enjoyed. So initially, when I went to Boston College, I thought that I was going to be a litigator, a trial lawyer.
Okay.
So that's really what I focused on while I was there. I mean, I took the whole array of corporate classes, everything else that you have to take, but that's really what I thought I wanted to do. But I just, and I said, look, it can't hurt to have a law degree. So that's really why I did it. And BC at the time, I think it still is, was a relatively high ranked school. I think it was probably top 20. And I felt very comfortable in Boston. And at the time, actually, I thought I might stay in Boston.
Wow. There's a transition, huh? From that rough beginning to almost staying. So what brought you back to Miami?
A couple things. In September of '86, which was the middle of my second year of law school, my dad had a really bad automobile accident. Thank God he recovered,
Yes.
but it was touch and go.
Yes. Okay.
And I got a call at 2 a.m. Saying, you got to get on a plane, your dad's in surgery, etc. And so I grabbed a 7 o'clock flight. I came home. I think I stayed about a week and a half, 2 weeks till he got out of ICU. And then I went back and I said, I'm not really sure that I'm going to do this. In December of the same year, I met my wife.
Okay.
She didn't know that I was the one, but I knew that she was the one. So,
smart man, Mick.
Yep. So, and she made it pretty clear that she was going nowhere. She was staying in Miami. So I think those two things really led me to want to come back. And then I got a summer job here in Miami with a firm. So I said, all right, let's see how that goes. And by then I was already hooked because I said, I'm coming back. So that's sort of how it happened.
And you've had a very, very long and successful legal career. When you do something for a long time, some people, let's face it, it gets old, they burn out, they lose their inspiration. What do you still enjoy? What do you derive satisfaction of as an attorney after more than 3 decades of doing this?
Well, as I told you initially, I thought I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I thought I wanted to be in court. After about 3 years of doing that, I knew I didn't want to be in court. I found it to be not as satisfying as I thought it would be.
Okay.
And then since my family was in the business world,
Yes.
I thought to myself, wait a second, I probably could do business law, corporate law, transactional law. So I transitioned about 4 years into my practice, 3.5, 4 years into doing corporate work. So that was probably 1991, 1992. And that's what I've been doing since that time. the good thing about having done what I did with litigation is I know just enough to be dangerous and just enough to tell people, the good and the bad of litigation.
Yeah.
But what I enjoy from the transactional work is that I feel as if I'm putting deals together. I'm moving things forward. I'm not just handling the defense or the prosecution of a case. I'm actually helping somebody buy a business, helping somebody sell a business, helping somebody organize their business. And for me, that's very rewarding because having come from a business family, background, I realize the value of doing that. So, I get a kick out of organizing, of structuring those things, and I still do to this day. I mean, I really enjoy that part of what I do.
Well, that's very gratifying, obviously. And the family business we're going to get to in a moment because it's quite a family business. But the other family, the Columbus family,
Mm-hmm.
how did you get involved as counsel to Columbus and your involvement with the school board? Who drew you in? How did that happen? You've been doing it. You've been doing that forever as well. So walk us down that path of your deep, deep involvement and commitment to Columbus High School.
Well, when I moved back to Miami in 1988, what I would do is basically read the box scores in the paper from the football, the baseball, the basketball, whatever sports we had, and that was really because we didn't really have a lot of events back then. It
No.
was you'd go to a game or something. I think in '91, which was my 10-year reunion, was the first time I kind of went back to school other than to a sporting event.
Okay.
So in 1998, 1999, my classmate, Hernan Organvitas, class of '81 also, called me and he said, do you want to be on the school board? And I said, Columbus has a school board? And he said, yes. And I said, well, Hernan, and by the way, Hernan and I are still dear friends. I met him first day freshman year at Columbus, and we're still best of friends.
Isn't it amazing?
Yep. And in that homeroom, we had George Moss, Duffy Martitas, Hernan, you could just go on and on with Sean DeKnight was not in that class, but Sean was somebody that I probably met the first day as well.
Yes.
So Hernan asked me if I wanted to be on the school board, and I said, H, I've been on a lot of boards, and it's kind of a waste of time. He goes, oh, no. They're going to put you to work. You're going to actually have to do stuff here because we're not a rubber stamp board. And I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was Brother Angelo's final year as principal. And then Brother Patrick McNamara came in the next year. And I think Brother Kevin had just come back.
He had just come back from New Jersey, correct? Yeah.
Right. So, I went on the school board, and sure enough, the first day, they were creating committees, and this is what you're going to do, and this is when you're going to meet, etc. And I was just a board member at the time. I was not, acting as the school. The school did not have actually a school lawyer. I think they would call people from time to time when things came up.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. So I started doing that, and then little by little, I got more and more involved. And I remember having conversations with Brother Kevin saying, brother, we got to look at this. We got to look at that. At the time, at some point in time, Ray Aberdeen was also on the school board.
Yes.
And he's class of '77.
Yes.
And Ray and I would basically tell Brother Kevin and then Brother Pat, we have to look at these issues, etc. At which point in time they would say, well, can you? And we said, of course we can. So we started doing that little by little. And then Ray and I were law partners for a while. So we basically became general counsel to the school. So when issues came up, whatever the issues were, they would call us, thankfully, and we would get involved, whether it was negotiation of contracts for the maintenance company, or whether it was, somebody got hurt on our property or whatever it might be. We did that. But we always had a role on the school board, whether it be in the marketing committee, whether it be in the finance committee, whether it be in the development committee, whatever committee it was. And everybody who's on the school board does something. Everybody, we talk about time, talent, and treasure. Everybody does it. It's one of the most amazing school boards, and we've had so many amazing people on it over the years. I mean, So to give you a chronology, and I don't want to dominate this, but I did it from 99 till 2013. And then I had to step off
Yeah.
because my son came to the school. And then in 2017, and Tim Plummer's son, by the way, was also on the board, and he had to step off
Yeah, Logan.
same
Yeah.
time because his
Yeah.
son was same as mine. I remember 2017, Brother Kevin took us out to dinner, and I called Tim and I go, you know what this is about, don't you? And he chuckled. And so he asked us to come back on the school board, which we did. But it's been what, 14 plus 19 years, I guess, on the school board. And I keep getting exemptions to be allowed back on every time.
Funny how that happens, right?
Well, I
Funny.
think I think they use the you're the lawyer exemption, so I think I'm okay.
You know, you and Ray were quite the duo together. There were, you know, some choppy waters here and there we had to navigate, and it was great to watch you guys work. And honestly, Mick, it's got to be a good feeling knowing that you have the trust of people like Brother Kevin, of Dave Pugh, of Tom Kruzak, know that they come to you and say, listen, what do we do? And you guys, you and or Ray, always came up with the answer. It was it's made us such a better institution, no doubt.
Well, I think it's more than simply that aspect. I mean, I'll give you an example. Every time we have a quote unquote crisis,
Yeah.
we have George Ortega. You know, and he would handle all of our communications.
Yeah, the PR aspect. Yeah, great job there. Yeah.
You know, we would have, you know, someone like Adrian Alfonso or Tom Harold,
Yeah.
or Manny Figueroa, you know, God rest his soul. I mean, we had some amazing people who would always step in, and you always had a team. You know, Ray and I were joking the other day because right now he and I are working on a case where he brought me in for the corporate part, and he goes, "We need a communications person." I called George Ortega.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
you know, and if you need a finance person, you know, I'll call Adrian. I mean, it's amazing how the network works, and how we not only support each other but support the school. And the school is amazingly grateful. They really, really are. I mean, it's not a situation where like, well, you're on and we feel like they're taking advantage. It's just the opposite. It's a very, like with Dave Pugh.
Yeah.
Dave will call me about something, and if he says thank you 32 times, it's too few, because the gratefulness of having us come back, it's very rewarding, certainly for me.
Yeah, and it was for us as well, no doubt. Mick, you're also in that privileged group. You're an alumni dad, you know,
Yeah.
and to have a son go through the same experience that you did with some of the very people that taught you, or some of your contemporaries who went on to work at Columbus, how gratifying. I mean, I have daughters, so I didn't get to have that experience. How gratifying was that for you as a dad to watch young Mick start as a ninth grader and evolve into the fine young man that he became, and on to Villanova University, distinguished institution in itself. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, I have three daughters as well.
Hmm.
And he came almost 6 years after my youngest daughter. So he was an oops.
It
Um,
happens.
Yep. So I was like, I'm going to be just like you, three daughters or two daughters or five daughters, whatever. So I will tell you that I'm incredibly proud of him, because when he got there, everybody at the school knew me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
he said, goes, Dad, I can't get away with anything.
No.
And I would chuckle and I would say, well, that's good. And he goes, well, and later, now he's 22 years old. We have great conversations because he goes, it was good for me because I had to develop my own identity. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of guys go there with, no pre-established identity, or, they don't know anything about them. In his case, they knew that I was very involved in the school. They knew that I was around campus all the time because of the things that we had to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm incredibly proud of him because he established his own identity. He created his own legacy, for lack of a better word, but what he wants to be known as. And it was incredibly rewarding for him. And he still similarly keeps in touch with his Columbus friends. He follows Columbus. When he was at Villanova, he watched the state championship game
Yeah.
2019, and he's
Yeah.
texting me during the game, that type of stuff, which his friends are looking at him, like, what are you doing? It's a Friday night. He goes, I'm watching my high
Yeah.
school play in the state championship game.
Yeah.
So it was incredibly gratifying for me, rewarding, I think more so for him because he became his own man.
He did, and watching that, he came in as your son, yes, but he left with his own identity,
Yep.
totally separate than yours, and that's what Columbus does, and it was fun watching him evolve, and I'm glad he went to Villanova, as we share that, and he always kept in touch and gave me one of my favorite T-shirts of all time, so. Kelly's Kelly's Tap Room, notorious.
Yes.
He may have spent a night or two there, as did I.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
it's the whole tradition thing. And
It was studying sociology. All he wanted to do was study sociology.
yeah, human behavior.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. That Kelly's Tap Room. Hey, Mick, the other thing, the family business,
Yes.
you know, Maspons Funeral Home is one of the most respected and recognized names in Miami, but very, very few people have any idea of what it's like growing up in a family that runs a funeral home. Lots of people grow up, their dad might be an attorney or a doctor or whatever, but funeral homes, what was that like? I mean, that's just an obvious question. What was that like growing up in that environment?
Well, my grandfather was a Rivero funeral
Okay.
home, and he had funeral homes in Cuba, which he started in the 1940s, which he lost or were taken from him by the Castro government in the 60s, and he came here and started all over again. And so, I was born. My mother's an only child, so she's the only Rivero directly from my grandfather. My father, Maspons, was an architect. He had nothing to do with the funeral industry. So when my mother would go to work, my grandfather, my great grandmother, and my great grandfather lived on the second floor of his funeral home in Miami.
Okay.
So she would drop me and my brother off at the funeral home, and she'd go to work. So we grew up basically, and this was mostly during the summers, on the second floor of a funeral home. So we would see how a funeral home worked. We would see how he dealt with families. I remember as a young kid, I would look at him and say, how can you do this? This is so eerie. And he'd look at me and he goes, if I can help somebody at the worst time of their lives, I've done something good. And I still remember that, my grandfather saying that to me, and that always resonated with me. So, as I grew up, my first job was at the funeral home. I was in charge of basically anything no one else wanted to do.
Of course.
So I'd take out the garbage, clean up the flowers, run errands, go pick up everybody's coffee, whatever it was. That's what I
Yeah.
did.
Well, the ground floor up, right?
Exactly. So that's what we did. And then, so fast forward, my grandfather sold the business in 1994. And my brother had been working at the business. I never worked as like a funeral director. I would do like the legal work for the
Yeah,
funeral.
yeah.
And I remember in late 1996, I came home and I looked at my wife and I said, honey, I have an idea. And every time I would say, honey, I have an idea, she would say, oh my God, what's he up to now?
Here we go.
Yeah. And I said, we need to open up our own funeral home because my grandfather was not working at that business any longer, the one that he sold. So in 1997, we opened up Maspons Funeral Home. My brother, myself, my wife, who I took away from teaching to get her involved in the funeral home. That was the idea that I had, by the way. Honey, you're going to run the funeral home.
Instead of a classroom, a funeral home. Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
right. And then
Why
my
not?
grandfather.
Yeah.
And so he worked with us until the day he died in 2006, which is one of those things, 88 years old. And one of the things that I think I take the most joy from, that, he got to continue to do what he loved to do till the day he died.
What more can you ask, Mick?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's basically, how we got involved, how we stayed involved, and how we are involved to this day.
It's what you said earlier about, that quote about if you can help somebody at their lowest, worst moment, there's got to be some immense gratification in that. You talk about what gratifies you in life as a career. Helping people through a difficult moment like that, that's an art form. You want to help, but you don't want to intrude. You don't want to go too far. That is an art form.
I call it a vocation.
Okay.
That's what I
Yeah.
tell my wife, because
Yeah.
my wife will come home and she will tell me about a family that she just worked with. And by the way, she'll get calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not because they find her, but because she tells them to call her.
Yeah.
If you have any question, yesterday we were driving around and she was helping a family with some, the loved one passed away 3 weeks ago, but
Yeah.
they had a question about something. I look at it as a vocation. I look at it as an incredibly gratifying thing and I don't take any credit for it because I don't do what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I watch what they do and how they talk about the families and how they talk about it. And it's, I'm very close with Father Valley, the priest.
Yes. Yeah.
And he and I will talk about that. And he goes, "You're right. It's sort of like a vocation, because when he helps a family, when he reads the last rites, when he gives communion to someone, et cetera, if you don't love what you're doing, forget it. You can't
Well,
do
it's
it."
going to show too.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm honored by what these people in my family have done, and I exclude myself because I can't do what they do.
And COVID obviously has affected everyone in every field, but in your field particularly, COVID had to become incredibly challenging, and there was no handbook, no
Mhm.
playbook for that.
Yep. I mean, it was every day there was a new challenge. Every day there was something new that no one had seen. For example, Cuban families like to have their viewings.
Sure.
They like to have their large gatherings. Picture telling a family, "I'm sorry, initially you can't have anybody here. Then you can have 10. Then eventually you could get up to 50. You can't." It was just a continuous change of things. I was once again, let's talk about the Columbus connection. As we were going through this process, I was working very closely with Carlos Jimenez's office
Okay.
to find out what we could do.
Yeah.
I remember I called Hernan, Organ Vitas, the same one, and I said, in these particular regulations that they came out, they don't address funeral homes. So Hernan called Carlos Jimenez's office, and they were amazing in just immediately jumping on and addressing the issue. I mean, once again, we made the call, but it helped all funeral homes figure out how can we service these families. So, and then just helping the families through this and just dealing with the volume.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people don't realize is it wasn't just COVID deaths. It was folks who couldn't get to their doctor. It was folks who weren't getting their checkups, weren't taking their medications. And I'm convinced a lot of people, passed away from depression and just anxiety and
Oh,
sadness.
sure, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it was a challenging time, and one of those things that we'll never forget. 30 years from now, we'll look back and say those 2 years were. I mean, it was like a blur.
Yeah. Once in 100-year event. So the family business has led you to put on a different hat. And coming up, your playwriting debut, uh, Las Lorañas. Did I say that correctly?
Lloronas.
Okay, thank you for that. I can say it in English, the mourners.
There
Uh,
you go. There you go.
so tell us about this, Mick, because this is pretty cool. Taking your real life experience and writing a play about it. And did you ever have a desire to be a writer? Tell us all about the play.
Okay. Well, I'll give you some background. I've always loved writing,
Okay.
just for fun.
Yeah, sure.
I was thinking about this when we're going to have this call. I'm like, when did I really start like writing?
Yeah.
And I remember I had a class at Columbus, I think it was my sophomore year, but it was a Brother Angelo class.
Okay.
And it was, I'm not sure if it was English or humanities or whatever it was, but one of the assignments was, which I think it made was 30% of our grade, to write a short story. It had to be 30 to 50 pages long or something like that. And it was the whole semester. We had all of our other stuff, but this was due at the end of the semester. And I remember I wrote this play. It wasn't a play, it was a short story.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun. It was like, we talk about sports, like when you get into that zone.
In the groove. Yeah. Yeah.
And I would get into like when you're about to tackle somebody, which I know
Yeah.
you did a lot of when you played. It's like when I would see the baseball and it was the size of a,
Yeah.
a beach ball. Right. So, and I had so much fun doing it. And then all the way through college, I took creative writing courses and I just liked it in addition to everything else that you would do just for fun. I never thought of it as anything other than just for fun. So as I got older, I would continue to do it, but once again, just for fun. I would write little stories about whatever it might be. And then I would write stories about growing up in a funeral home and some interesting cases, some real, some completely fictitious. And if I told you about them, you wouldn't know which were which, because
Okay.
the real ones you would say that never happened. And I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
And the fake one you would say, oh yeah, that makes sense. So then as time went on, I started writing more and more. And then I wrote now I'm fast forwarding to probably 2013. I started writing a pilot script for a television show.
Okay.
Which I called Late Night Mornings, Mourninga.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
And it was 6 Feet Under meets Que Pasa USA.
Perfect.
So and I wrote that. I finished that in January of 2020.
Of course. Okay.
And I was going to try to do something with it. And what happened in March of 2020?
Boom. COVID.
Right.
Here we go. Yeah.
Right. So I had this pilot script that I'd worked on. I'd hired professional writers to help me. I'd hired all these different people. And now I'm like, So a friend of mine was putting on a musical here in Miami, and I went to see it because he invited me. It was probably in the fall of 2020 when things were opening up a little bit, and it was an outdoor thing.
Yeah.
And I asked him after I went to the show, I said, could you introduce me to your writer? Because maybe I can write a play. Of course, like when you're ignorant, you have no idea that a theater and a movie or TV are two completely different worlds. So I started with the gentleman who he introduced me to, and we wrote for a year. But we had to actually completely change the format because TV and theater are two different worlds.
Yeah. Not even close.
And
Yeah.
TV could be something where you would write, you see your TV shows and your, Homeland, and you can go on and on. There's like a seasonal arc. A play is one shot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the Lloronas, which are professional mourners, had been part of Late Night Mornings, where it was one of the things that I did. And I pulled that out and I made this play about that, about the professional mourners. And to not keep dominating, but I'll tell you where it came from. It's actually a very funny story. People say, oh, there must have been professional mourners at your funeral home. No, there weren't. We didn't have professional mourners. But when I was a little kid and I started working at the funeral home, I remember I would go to work and I would tell my grandfather, I would say, Abuelo, the same women are going to all the services. I see them every morning. I said, I swear to, because back then we had the 24-hour viewings.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I'd get in at 8 o'clock in the morning and they were like on their way out. And I would say, wait a second. I know I saw her yesterday. I know so he would say, are you crazy? I go, do you bring them in to cry? And he looked at me like I was an alien. And he said, are you crazy? But that always stuck with me. So then I researched it and I realized that it's something that's been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
The professional mourners as a sign of respect, to grieve with the families, etc. So I took that and I twisted it a little bit in the play, where, we have, and I'm not giving anything away for the people who are going to watch the play because it's in our synopsis. It basically, one of them took it and has made it into a criminal enterprise.
Oh, perfect.
Within the funeral home.
Perfect.
But it's not a comedy. It's not a comedy. It's a.
Would you say there's
it's a
dark
family
humor? Maybe dark
yeah,
humor.
It's definitely got dark humor.
Okay.
It's about a family. You will see some similarities to my family, but also some big differences. A family that started a funeral home in Cuba, who came to the United States, running a family business with all of the challenges, the highs and lows of being involved in a family business, of being involved in death care, which is, once again, highs and lows. And then we throw in the professional mourners, which that started as a very noble enterprise and then got a little off course.
A little off course.
That's
awesome.
really a synopsis of the play.
And it's opening up March 3rd, and it's going to run through, I think, March 20th, I believe. And it's at the new theater, Tropical Park, which I've driven by. I've not been in it. Tell us about, how did you land that venue, and then what is it? Describe the whole Tropical Park Cultural Arts Center, I believe it's called.
Yeah, it's called the Westchester Cultural Arts Center. Well, when we finished writing it in November, and by the way, it's 90% in Spanish. It's got some of the young one talking to the older Cuban parent in English and that kind of stuff, a little bit of the Capasa USA, but I wanted to keep true to the roots of, in Cuba, it has to happen in Spanish.
Yeah, I get that. It wouldn't have worked in English.
Right. So, we do have scenes back and forth from Cuba, the United States, etc. So when we finished it, we started looking for a location. The Westchester Cultural Arts Center was inaugurated. It opened in, I think, June or July of last year, but they weren't 100% ready to open yet.
Okay.
So we kept looking and looking and looking, and then probably in October, November, because we started looking before we finished, to give you some background. And then in November we finished. I got a call from a friend of mine who said, you need to call them because I think they're ready.
Okay. And
I did. I got in touch with an amazing person, a guy named George Cabrera, who was involved in Amparo, which Amparo was an incredibly popular play that they did downtown Miami, which was at a house. And it followed the Cuban experience of the family that started the Havana Club brand and how the Cuban government took it from them, et cetera. So this gentleman was a producer, George Cabrera, and he was amazing. He helped us get into the theater, working with a company called the Roxy Theater Group, who is an amazing, they basically train kids to become actors, singers, et cetera. They have an amazing training program. They run the theater.
Okay.
And George was their guy. So we were working very closely with him. Unfortunately, 3 weeks ago, George passed away suddenly from a heart attack.
I heard about that. That's terrible.
It was just 44 years old. Awful.
Oh, come on, man. No.
Yeah. So our play was supposed to start February 24th. We moved it back a week.
Yeah.
Because obviously we need a little bit of time. But they have been amazing with us. So what is the theater? The theater is what they call a black box. So, and once again, I'm learning as I go along because people say, "Oh, how many plays have you written?" I'm like, one. So a black box is basically just, it looks like a warehouse.
Okay.
And you could do whatever you want inside. You could put risers, you could put platforms, you could put seats going up, you could put seats on the floor, you could put cocktail tables, you could put whatever you want.
Gotcha.
The way we're going to do it is we're going to have 7 sets, 7 scenes.
Okay.
And then everyone is going to be right in the middle of all of it. So that's why they talk about a hyper realistic theatrical experience. You're going to be sitting basically right next to a funeral chapel. You're going to be sitting right next to, and I'm not going to give it all away, but all of the scenes, you're going to be right in the middle of all of them when you come to the theater. And there's a cocktail that starts before the show, and the cocktail area has been created to look like an old Havana bar.
Nice.
So our designers have made it into an old Havana bar. It's very, very Cuban. The themes, the photographs, the props, everything. It's very, very Cuban, because it's a Cuban play. And our food, our liquor, we're trying to follow the theme. Cuban coffee will be,
Of course.
well represented.
Of course.
So, and the great thing about this theater is there's no issue with parking.
Yeah.
Tropical Park has a ton of parking.
Yeah.
It's not every day. It's Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Sunday we start earlier for people who got to work on Monday. It's got an amazing cast. I mean, I look at these people and I'm like, why would these people want to be involved in my play? Really?
But this would be pretty good then.
So we've got 16 cast members. It's been so exciting. I mean, I go to the rehearsals and I watch these people perform, and it's just been, the other day I was telling my wife, as I was driving home, I started crying. And I said, I cannot believe that this is happening. So it was very emotional, because you're telling a family story.
Sure.
And you're also doing something that, some people have looked at me and said, you're crazy. What are you doing? But most people look at me and say, really, Mick, you did this? And it's been really, really cool. It's been a very, very fun experience. And Columbus has been incredibly supportive. As you know, March the 6th is Columbus night.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that other folks can't go, but I would like to have as many folks from Columbus, because part of the idea is to make a donation from part of the proceeds to the drama department at Columbus, which has been so successful. They're doing an amazing job.
Yeah. And you talk about outlets at Columbus High School.
Mm-hmm.
To have those type of kids that want to explore performing arts, what more can you ask?
Yep.
Yep. And Mick, if somebody wants more information on this, where do they go?
They can go to Las Lloronas, LASLLORONAS play.com. And that has all the ticket information. We also have an Instagram, Las Lloronas, same LLORONAS Miami, which has fun stuff. The cool thing about the Instagram is it shows the rehearsals happening.
Nice.
And one other thing that I want to mention, because it's another Columbus thing, CCNN will be doing a documentary.
Oh, yeah. Omar told me.
The making, and which is, I mean, wow, that is just so cool to have. I mean, you've seen what those boys have done.
Yeah, they're as good as they get. Yeah, no doubt. So the mourners, I mean, being Irish, we used to have people crash the wake. It's like, who is that guy?
Right.
So this is such a cultural thing. I think it's awesome, and obviously break a leg on that one, brother. I'm sure it's going to be a home run. And Mick, we could keep going and going and going, and this has been a lot of fun. So, final question for you as we wrap things up. What's it mean to you to be an explorer for a lifetime?
Oh, gosh. It means that I'm never alone, really. I mean, it's, I've got so many friends. I mean, I have some of the folks that I have reached out to over my life, times of need. I'm not going to say it's always explorers, but I'm going to say it's predominantly explorers.
Yeah, man.
I could tell you that at the school, if I were to call Brother Kevin, if I were to call Tom Krushek, if I was to call David Pugh, I can even call you, even though you're enjoying your palatial estate in Macon, Georgia.
Yes.
I know that you got my back, and that's the way that we have always been for each other. And I don't know, I'll tell you a funny story, and we'll wrap up with that. My son-in-law is now teaching at Columbus,
and he's doing an amazing job. And he is such a character. We'll talk about that later.
Yes. So his name is Bruce Ferguson.
Oh, my Lord.
When he told me that he wanted, because he and my daughter moved down from New York, he said, I'd be interested in teaching at Columbus. I'm like, Bruce, we are a very interesting group. I don't know. And my daughter will now look at me and say, Dad, he's drank the Kool-Aid more than you.
Oh, man. He fit right in.
Yep.
The Ferger King.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Right. So I use him as an example uh, of what Columbus is. He said, I have incredible support from the faculty and administration, but those kids, because I love those kids.
Yeah,
Those kids want to be at Columbus. They want to learn. They want. I mean, it's amazing to see that. And for me, that's the poster child. I mean, Hernan Organ Vitas is the poster child
sure.
for what we are. I mean, Hernan came from public school with, an amazing family, but no outside support network. And look at what he's accomplished in his life. And he just got some help. He got some support. I look at people like that. I look at Trajan Bandy, who we talked about.
Mm.
There's just so many examples, and I know you got 1,000. You taught them all, for God's sakes. I look at you. I look at what you have done. God rest his soul, Fred Foyo,
Yeah.
Steve O'Brien, all the people who you've mentioned. These people are legends because they have shaped lives. Forget about what I do. I help people do a contract. You guys affect somebody's life forever, and it affects their kids' lives because the teachers who affected me have allowed me to hopefully affect my son. So it's legendary. Some of the people, and I know all teachers do that, but there's a special sauce that we got. I really believe that.
It's in the water, my friend.
Yep.
No
Yep.
doubt
And
about
I thank you for all of your years of service. I'm so happy that you're still involved with us because we need you. We need all of us because it's a very, very special fraternity, and we got to keep you all around.
Proud to be part of it, my brother. So, Mick, thanks very much. I learned a lot today. It was pretty cool, I have to admit. And I look forward to seeing you soon. All the best in all your endeavors. And thank you sincerely. Thank you for your service to Columbus High School.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me on your show. I love your show. My wife looked at me this weekend and she goes, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I'm catching up on the show so I don't mess up." So,
Well, it's pretty hard to mess up on this one, Mick, but
right.
this was a blast. It was a great time. And so thank you very much. Explore Nation. Hope you enjoyed this one. It was a lot of fun to do. We got a lot of special guests yet to come. So until next time, take it easy and adelante. Thank you, Mick.
Thank you. Adelante.